What's going on YouTube? In today's video we're going to go over the cycles of function on a AR-15 type rifle. I feel like a lot of people own these and they don't really know how they operate internally. And I'm not going to get into a lot of technical details or anything like that. I'm going to kind of keep it simple. But the thing is if you understand the cycles of function, then you can diagnose almost any problem. That goes for any firearm, not just an AR-15. But we're going to go over this real quick. This is just a standard civilian AR-15, not anything fancy. Excuse me. So we're going to run through the cycles of function on this real fast. Kind of give you guys an overview of what to look for if you have problems. You can diagnose your malfunction. It's a lot easier if you kind of understand what's going on inside. So here we have the AR-15, and the first cycle of function we're going to talk about is feeding. So if we can take a look at the bolt, how it rides inside the upper receiver here in the bolt carrier group, this is obviously what feeds your round. When that bolt carrier group comes forward, the top of the bolt is going to grab the round out of the magazine, push it into the chamber, and then it's going to be chambered, which is the next step. And when it chambers, we all know that the bolt face here rotates, right? Inside the locking legs, when it rotates in and it locks into the star chamber of your weapon with the brass locked into the face of the bolt. That's steps 2 and 3 is chambering and locking, right? So when it goes into the chamber, it's going to rotate. When it gets pushed forward all the way, the bolt does, it rotates, it locks in, so chambering and locking have occurred. So right there we've got 3 cycles of function out of the way. You have chambering, pushing the round out of the magazine into the chamber, the bolt rotates, locking it, right? So there's feeding, locking, and chambering all kind of happening at the same time there. The next thing that's going to happen is firing, right? So when you fire, your firing pin obviously, or excuse me, your hammer obviously is going to strike the firing pin inside the bolt. This weapon's kind of dirty, so excuse my hands. It's going to hit the firing pin inside there, and it's going to fire the round off. So there's firing. I mean, that's pretty simple. So things you have to look for is make sure your firing pin is free floating. It's a semi-fixed firing pin for those that aren't familiar with the term. Meaning it doesn't stay in one location. It does have a little bit of play movement to it. So make sure your firing pin is able to move on its own. It should kind of flop back and forth. Like I said, this one's a little dirty, but it does flop back and forth. So when your hammer does strike that firing pin in there, it goes forward and strikes the primer, making the projectile go off. I know this is kind of basic stuff, but a lot of people don't really understand this, I think, and it makes me nervous when you're on the range and there's somebody that has one of these rifles and they really don't know how it works in particular, because it makes diagnosing problems a little bit more difficult for them. It could be a safety issue too if you have a pop no kick, things of that nature. You need to know what to look for. So the next thing that happens after firing occurs is unlocking. Now remember, this bolt face is fully extended. When you fire the rifle, it's locked into the star chamber inside here, right? So it's locked in. When you fire, the gas comes down the gas tube, travels down it. It introduces gas into the chamber. And it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of PSIs. I don't know what it is, but it's a lot. So it actually, when you first fire the rifle, it is too dangerous for that chamber to unlock and let that gas escape into the chamber immediately after firing. And that is why there is this little bit of play where it does rotate back, right? You see that it does move just a hair, a very small fraction, and that is to allow the gas pressure to reach a safe point before it unlocks and the bolt carrier and the bolt begin their rearward movement. When the gas comes into the block here through this key, So the gas comes in down the gas tube into this block, forces the bolt carrier to the rear. Like I said, when the gas chamber pressure reaches a safe level, it catches up with itself. The bolt face rotates again, unlocking from the star chamber. Your bullet is clipped in to your bolt face via the extractor. Okay, the little button there is your ejector, and that's what's going to kick the round out of the ejection port. It's just a spring. You have to make sure that that spring is functioning. It's not broken, it's not stiff, it's not immovable. You can just test that with a piece of brass or whatever you want to do. So once it begins its rearward movement, as soon as the bolt clears the ejection port, the brass is going to be extracted and ejected out the side. So as soon as that brass clears to the point where it can flip out, it flips out, and then you have an unobstructed bolt. It's going to go all the way back to the rear again. When it does that, it's going to cock your hammer back for you once again, and then your bolt carrier group is going to continue into the buffer spring right here, which absorbs the recoil and the force of the rearward movement of the bolt. It's always good to make sure that your buffer spring is in good working order. It's not wore out or anything, because that can really affect the force with which your bolt carrier group travels forward again. If it's not oomphy enough, you're not going to have a solid lock. It's not going to feed properly. So those are things you need to look for. Similarly, your trigger assembly and your hammer, you need to make sure that those are in working order. There's nothing loose or anything like that, because if this thing is off kilter, it can foul up the process when your bolt carrier group is moving back and forth across the top of it. So there's just some things to look for internal when your weapon is operating. So if you have a failure to feed, a failure to fire, a failure to extract, or a failure to eject, those are the things you need to look for. Is failure to feed, is there anything impeding the forward movement of the bolt carrier? On the bolt carrier itself, failure to feed, is there something wrong with your extractor or your ejector? That's what you need to look for. Is the bolt rotating freely within the bolt carrier group? Is the chamber unobstructed? All those things you need to kind of figure out, because all that stuff happens in a fairly rapid fashion: feeding, locking, chambering, and firing. Okay, so once it unlocks, it comes all the way back. The round has been extracted and ejected. The bolt is all the way to the rear of the weapon. It comes into the buffer spring, like so. Pushes back, recocks the weapon for you, and then it is sent back forward to once again feed another round, chamber, and lock. Okay, I mean it's pretty simple, but a lot of people just don't get the dynamics of how that all works together, I guess. So some key things I just want to point out. Inside here, your gas tube, I don't know if you guys can see this very well. Your gas tube inside here, where it comes into the chamber on the upper receiver, you have to make sure that it's free of any kind of dents, nicks, obstruction. It's not fouled up with a whole lot of carbon. Same thing for the key on top of your bolt carrier. You need to make sure that thing is pretty clean. You can run a pipe cleaner in there and take care of that. And you just want to make sure all these things move as they're designed to, or not. Like your bolt key should not move, right? Like it has these torque down screws at the very top of the key. The gas key should not go anywhere, ever. If it wiggles, you have a problem. And what happens if it's loose, guys, if it does wiggle, it's going to ram into that gas tube inside the upper receiver. It's going to bend it. It's going to mess it up. It could bend this part as well, obviously, because this thing is slamming back and forth as you're firing, and it has to fit. If it's loose in any way, you're going to goof it up, and it's going to cost you a lot of money to fix it. So I just kind of wanted to run over that real quick, because I don't think a lot of people understand the cycles of function as they're happening, especially in the AR series rifle. Like, a lot of people don't know about that little delay before the bolt actually unlocks to allow that extra gas pressure to come out. That's why it's real crucial that your bolt be matched to your barrel. I know a lot of guys that build ARs, I'm not going to get into all that, but when they build those ARs, they don't exactly headspace. You know, Usually you buy them as a set, you know, a bolt that's matched to a barrel. That's what you ought to do. A lot of people argue you don't have to do that. I'm of the opinion it's probably a good idea. When I was in the Army, we did have these things tested for headspace periodically, just because it's a thing that can be an issue. Um, Probably not for normal everyday wear. You know, I mean, like if you're putting thousands and thousands of rounds down range, then you're going to have to get that stuff looked at eventually. So just some stuff I wanted to go over real quick. It's nothing fancy. I don't know. A lot of people have these rifles. They are the most popular rifle out there, as we all know. And I just feel like a lot of times they're not really aware of how they work internally, as far as like the gas pressure buildup, the delay that is built in for that gas pressure to dissipate before the bolt carries all the way backwards. Just wanted to kind of go over that with you guys. And like I said, if you have a foul up, failure to feed, failure to fire, failure to extract, failure to cock, you know, it doesn't lock, it doesn't chamber correctly. If you know how those things operate in sequence, you can more easily diagnose what's wrong with it, with the weapon, and kind of figure it out from there. So that's just what I wanted to go over really quick. Nothing too big. I'll probably do one on a pistol, like a semi-automatic pistol also, just to like cycles of function, maybe on a Beretta 92 or maybe a 1911, something like that. It's a similar principle. And I know a lot of you guys probably already know this stuff, but I think that if more new shooters understood cycles of function as it relates to their specific firearm and how it operates internally, as far as all the moving parts, what they do, where they're supposed to ride, and that's something I didn't really touch on either. I guess I can now. Is like, where are your metal parts supposed to come together? Where's the friction? Where is metal on metal contact happening in here? Because those are the parts you really need to make sure are lubricated properly, to keep wear down on the metals. So if you understand where metal to metal contact is happening inside your bolt, carrier group, upper receiver, you can minimize damage to your weapon with proper lubrication. It's real important. Same thing with your buffer spring. A lot of people never think to lubricate that buffer spring. Probably a good idea, because it is, you know, flipping around back in there. Some tubes, it's going to make a lot of contact. It can make wear spots, and it'll weaken your spring over time. I mean, like a long period of time. That's just what I wanted to go over real quick, guys. Nothing too serious. Just wanted to kind of run that through. Not going to go into function tests or anything like that, but you guys get the general idea. All right, that'll do it for this time. I'll try to drop another video in about a week or so. Maybe I'll go over cycles of function on a pistol, a semi-automatic pistol. All right, thanks for watching.